how did you connect with Tauren?
You're sort of always aware of people around you in a community. And Torren was sort of one of those. I remember seeing him at board riders things. Not that I was ever big on board riders, but I'd be there with Dash or something, and he'd be aware of Torren, and he was riding lots of shortboards in that period, and he had a Torren's tall and angular and moves beautifully through the world, and we all notice those things, when something attracts your eye, and anyway, so I was always aware of him. And then Tracksmag were doing some projects up here, and they had a house on the beach, and they were getting a bunch of us to shape boards for this. They were going to have like some kind of little camp out thing at this house and just surf, and oh, that's right, they got artists in and all this sort of thing, and made a little film about it. And it was just about this week in this beach house, and I first met Tauren there, and I'd shaped. They wanted kind of something. They wanted obscure things for this shoot, and I'd shaped an asymmetric single fin, and I had Tauren in mind. I was like, yeah, it'd be really cool to see him because he was tall and angular and that sort of thing. I think the first day I ever met him, I can't remember how many years ago this is now, maybe 7 years ago or something. And anyway, I picked him up, and we drove down to the point, and Tauren rode this single fin, and incidentally, he never really gels with single fins, but I saw him do a few turns on that particular day at Lennox, and he did a couple of these real 12 o'clock re-entries on this single fin, and it just looked so spectacular. It was like, wow, the body matched the board, matched the wave. And there was a certain smoothness to it, and anyway, I was like really impressed, I was like, oh, wow. And then I can't remember exactly where it went from there, but I made him another couple of boards, whatever they were. And he took one to Desert Point. And anyway, then he came home with that board, and we ended up putting some plugs in it so that you could ride it as a single fin. And then he went back to Bali and this board ended up becoming the only board that he rode on that trip or whatever. It was just one of those boards that really kind of clicked, and it sort of rolled on from there. That the single fin that we turned into a twin fin, So, and there's so many similarities to single fins and twin fins, which is why straight away that was always going to work anyway. He really got attached to that board, and we just started tinkering from there, and oh man, we've bounced around so many different ideas with twin fins. He's really look, it was a strange thing to watch him go from being a shortboard guy to a ride all lengths twin fin guy. There was one stage there where I remember looking back on it, thinking, imagine telling Tauren a year ago that one of his favourite boards would be a 7.6 plus. He would have just looked at you and gone, you're kidding me, no way, because everything was sort of around, 6 foot would have been pretty long. So,
why do you think that he was open to transitioning off of the high performance thrusters?
I think that it's in Tauren's nature to look at the world with really open eyes. he's unafraid to be different. Maybe that's saying it wrong. He's just really happy being himself. And the more he's himself, which he clearly is all of the time, the more kind of blown away I am by watching him go through time. You know, he's a really, you know, unique human, and he's grown up around a lot of really unique humans, like, you know, Ishka, who's Tauren's filmmaker. You know, they've spent a lot of time together, those guys, under some really extreme conditions, and they're both incredible people who are really calm and prepared to take the world as it is, and never afraid by difference or obscurity or anything like that. Everyone, you can watch by Torren's manner in the water. You know, Tauren is he's never one of those hustlers in the water, and in turn, it's almost like the world just goes, oh, this guy over here, he's been so cool. He's the best wave of the day. You know, it's
Right.
it's uncanny, and he's just very open to all things, which is why he was totally out, you know, like some of the first boards I gave him was so out of left field from his shortboarding, but, you know, he happily took them and came back and goes, oh yeah, not so much this one, you know, whatever. It was like, he was, just very open-minded. Yeah.
I was surprised to hear you say there's a lot of similarities between single fins and twin fins. Can you explain what those similarities are? Because I don't see them right off the bat.
The rockers, and the way the foam is distributed through the board, are the two key things. Typically, the rockers are flatter, and I find it, when you look at it also depends on the era of single fin that you're looking at too. But if you go sort of closer towards the end of the 70s and you see how evenly the foam is distributed throughout the board, that's a really key ingredient for a good twin fin as well. I think twin fins, or I think all boards, I'm getting myself a bit tangled here, but I'm thinking of modern shortboard, and I'm thinking of single fins and twin fins, two totally different things, and all as viable as each other. But I think the one thing that I've always found with singles and twins is that by distributing the foam more evenly throughout the board, you create a bigger sweet spot, and that makes life so much easier for so many people, especially if you are just trying to blast out there and catch those three waves that I was talking about. You don't want to go out there and have to absolutely make sure your back foot lands in that spot and your front foot's in that spot. Otherwise, this board isn't going to go. You want to glide into a wave, skip your feet, and away you go. You know, so that's that thing about sweet spot. You know, it's so important to have a larger sweet spot rather than a tiny sweet spot. You know, so it also opens up the individuality in a person surfing too. You know, you can suddenly surf how you surf. I remember growing up, and you could always spot whoever it was on a wave from a long way away. You could go, oh, there's blah, 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 you know, and it was just the way they surfed, you know, and everyone had their own kind of groove going on. Even like the early days of the ASP and all that sort of thing, you know, you had Reno Abalira and Simon Anderson and you know, all of these different characters all surfing so differently on all this different equipment. It was, but anyway, as the boards got more and more tightened up, you end up controlling the stance and style of the surfer to a certain extent, because you have to conform to that really precise design.
Yeah.
Which is equally great. You know, I'm not running that down at all. You know, that's fantastic what's been achieved.
But it's interesting to think of all of that through the lens of Torren, because if he had continued riding those high performance shortboards, I don't really know that we would be able to differentiate him now from everybody, all the other pros that were doing that picked that path. But by virtue of him getting on your boards, he's appealed to a much kind of, he's opened all of our eyes to this alternative equipment that actually suits us so much better. And even though I'll never surf like Torren, when I watch Torren, it's a lot more relatable than when I watch Felipe Toledo or Italo Ferreira,
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And then also you're talking about the sweet spot on the board. The one board that I have from you, that's true for, but there's also a much broader sweet spot in the variety of waves that I can ride it in. Whereas the high performance shortboard, I'm only going to take out on a certain type of really good waves, essentially. That board, I've ridden it in 1 foot surf and had a blast, and I've ridden in head high point break surf, and it's equally as applicable in both conditions.
Yeah. Especially too, if you get, if you have a, don't get me wrong here, I'm not sort of advocating that, you know, alternative boards are the be all and end all or whatever, but there's also another thing. I'm kind of going to go back to those 3 waves again, right? I don't know why I hadn't planned on this, but if you jump in for a surf, it's low tide, there's a ton of current, and you've got to try and get these 3 waves. The last thing you want to be is really exhausted. So it's also really important to not confine yourself to having minimal amounts of foam at all times either. You know, if you can jump in something that's actually a good paddling machine as well, you're not going to be exhausted when that situation arises. Here's the wave, I'm the guy, and you're not huffing and puffing. You can just skip to your feet because it's all been a little bit easier. I mean, that's such a, you know, isn't that what it's kind of, to me, that's what it's all about. It's sort of maximizing the fun. And I know that's not anything revolutionary. That's what we're all trying to do. But it's as you were saying, a board that can be ridden in 1 foot waves and also be ridden in overhead waves, and kind of equally applies itself to both conditions. It's surely that's easier than, kind of confining yourself to something that's awkward sometimes and then perfect the other times. Yeah.